Okay, we're about halfway into the series for the canon games at least, so let's do a quick recap of what's happened so far. The story of Castlevania begins in 1094 with Leon Belmont, a crusader knight who battles the vampire Walter Bernhard to save his fiancée Sarah Trentul. Sarah dies, but her soul produces the vampire killer, a holy whip built to strike down evil. With it, Leon kills Walter, but Walter's soul is absorbed by his comrade Matthias Gronkfist, who had orchestrated the whole ordeal just to achieve immortality, and then they become enemies. Matthias flees, and for centuries, his whereabouts are unknown. He eventually emerges as Vlad Tepes, Count of Wallachia, also known as Dracula. As an extremely old and powerful vampire, Vlad is a force to be reckoned with, but not yet the true villain he would come to be. In the 15th century, he meets a woman named Lisa, with whom he has a child. But Lisa's taken from him. Swearing revenge against humanity, Dracula makes a pact with an evil deity and uses its power to unleash infernal armies upon the earth. The non-canon Castlevania Legends establishes that Sonia Belmont is the first to defeat the Vampire Lord in 1450, and she has a romance with Alucard, but that's all being retconned. In the current timeline, it's Trevor Belmont who enters Dracula's castle in 1476. Along the rebel Grant dynasty, the church sorcerer Sypha Belnatis, and Alucard, son of Dracula, he smites the monster, even against demonic power. The demon castle crumbles, and the heroes part ways. But that's far from the end of it. The world soon discovers that Dracula's dark curse plaguing the land will not relent. It sticks to human hearts like a disease. 3 years later, when Dracula's traitor general Hector pursues his rival Isaac, evil still roams. The two play right into the hands of Death, who uses Isaac's body as a vessel to resurrect the Count in his castle. Thankfully, in this incomplete form, Dracula's too weak. Hector, the Devil Forge Master, defeats him on his own, and dispels the curse for the time being. It should have ended there, with the Belmonts and everyone else living on in peace, but as the centuries went by, it turned out that Dracula's curse was far more persistent than it had seemed. Hector didn't erase it, he only weakened it. In 1576, 100 years after Trevor had killed him, Dracula returns. It's unclear how. This time, Christopher fights him, nearly destroying him in one of two possible timelines, but he escapes and returns in 1591, possessing Christopher's son. Then he's beat, for good, until he returns in 1691, 100 years later. This time it was a dark ritual of some kind. Simon fights him, defeats him in one of many possible timelines, but gets gravely injured in the process. And then in 1698, 7 years later, he sets out on a new journey to find the pieces of Dracula's corpse and wipe him out for good from Transylvania. Except, it's clear now that that will not be for good. Matthias Gronkfist, or Vlad Tepes, or Dracula, has already died 3 times by now, or maybe 4. Trevor killed him in 1476, then he tried coming back in 79 through Isaac, failed. Christopher nearly killed him in 1576, then actually killed him in 1591. And Simon killed him in 1691, then finished off the curse in 1698. It's a pattern that repeats itself. Dracula shows up, tries to destroy humanity, is beat once, returns, is beat again, comes back the next century. Like I've said before in these videos, he's immortal. I mean, beyond immortal, right? He's like a god, kind of, but there is a secret to his immortality. By this point in the series, it's very poorly understood. As far as people know, the guy just comes back, like from a fucking prophecy or destiny or something. But now that we're entering a new part of the franchise, we'll start getting a few more hints from the storyline. And by that I mean, of course, this is around the point where the writers actually started thinking about it. In this video, we'll see how Dracula's immortality, and in fact his very existence, has a lot to do with the Demon Castle. Or, I guess I should say, it has a lot to do with the Castlevania. Welcome, welcome! Harmony of Dissonance is the first Igavania I'm covering, though it's not the first Igavania released. But it's pretty different from everything else I've talked about thus far. If you're familiar with the term Metroidvania, this is where it originated from. Metroidvanias are games inspired by Metroid and Igavanias, so 2D platformers with a focus on exploration, item hunting, and opening new areas through said item hunting. Igavanias are so called because they're commonly associated with Koji Igarashi, who was very influential in many of these games as creative director and other roles. He wasn't in all of them though, and to be clear, this is a fan-made term. Konami didn't really differentiate Igavanias from Classicvanias in an official capacity. After they released Symphony of the Night in '97, they kinda just forgot Classicvanias existed for a while, and Symphony became the new golden standard for the series. Harmony is born from that standard. In a lot of ways, it lives in Symphony's shadow, though that can be said for most of the franchise. It was released in 2002 for the Game Boy Advance, the second on the system, and it's a very unique game. I played it twice to make this video, plus another playthrough for the alternate mode. I've generally considered myself more of a Classicvania guy, so these games didn't really appeal to me at first, but I have a lot to say on my experience with Harmony, and I'll get there, don't worry. We'll be skipping ahead to 1748, precisely 50 years after Simon destroyed Dracula's corpse in the ruins of his castle, probably with sacred flame. Our main characters this time are Juste Belmont, grandson of Simon, and Maxime Kishine, a master swordsman. Both were raised since birth to hunt the night, as childhood friends, but Maxime always felt lesser. Inheriting the vampire killer and gifted with incredible magical talent, Juste was always the shining star of the duo, and so the underdog Maxime set out on his own to prove his worth as a hunter of vampires. 2 years later, Maxime returned. Heavily injured, he told Juste that their common friend, Lydia Langer, had been kidnapped, but he couldn't quite recall the details. The two hurried off into the misty depths of the Romanian countryside hoping to save her, and what they found, lurking in the fog, was a harrowing castle that should not have been there. Juste and Maxime enter the castle together, looking for Lydie, but they're quickly separated. Maxime stays behind, catching his breath, and this short interval is enough for Juste to be pursued by a giant suit of armor and then get stuck behind the drawbridge. We'll see Maxime again soon, but for now we walk alone, which is a good moment for me to do a rundown of the game's mechanics. Movement-wise, Harmony is much more freeing than a typical Classicvania. You have control of your jumps, a dash that you can spam all the time. It feels really good to move in this game. In the Classicvanias, movement itself was a challenge that you had to face. You needed to know how to deal with the stiffness of the controls and the knockback and the moving platforms. In the Igavanias though, that's not really the case. Movement here is more of a means to get you to the challenge, not the challenge itself, so it needs to feel fun, and it does. I really like the dash. Honestly, you'd think it'd get annoying to have to spam it to move faster, but it feels good. Definitely way better than Hector's or Leon's dodge moves. We'll get more movement abilities later on, I'll get to them when it's time. Regarding combat, Juste is equipped, of course, with the Vampire Killer, though this time, quite interestingly, it only has one form. If you remember before, most Castlevanias we've seen give the whip multiple forms. You often start with the letter whip, then upgrade it to the chain whip, then upgrade that to the Morning Star. In the RPG-esque games like Vampire Killer or Castlevania 2, these upgrades were tied to the shop systems. You often had to buy them with hearts. It was a bit more complicated, but now that we're in a proper RPG Castlevania, they just ditched the upgrades entirely. It's just the Morning Star, though you do get some little treats for it as you play. It's interesting, they definitely did this to simplify the whip first and foremost, but lore-wise this could be explained as Juste having fine control over the whip's alchemical magic, so much that he can maintain its most powerful form as a permanent alteration. Back in Lament of Innocence, the letter whip was the only form of the whip, though it could also use elemental magic, but then Trevor could already use the Morningstar form, Christopher used fire magic, and so did Simon, so we can speculate there's been some kind of experimenting with the whip's powers throughout the generations. And it's a cool idea, but sometimes I wonder if the Chain Whip and the Morningstar are supposed to be canon. Because for example, in the artwork for Harmony of Dissonance, Juste is always using the letter whip even though he never does so in-game. And in Curse of Darkness, Trevor never uses the Chain Whip or the Morningstar, it's always the letter whip, even though he has all of them in his debut game. I guess letter whip looks more epic for the artwork, kind of, but I wish they draw the upgrades more. It's the whip, what else can I say? It is cool though that this game actually brings over the whip flailing from Castlevania 4, though it does not bring over multi-directional whipping. That was way too broken. But flailing is already cool enough and can help you in a pinch. In terms of sub-weapons, all the usual culprits have returned, though the stopwatch is replaced by the Bible, which spins around you like a shield, and we also have the newcomer, the Sacred Fist, which is just a punch. Like always, these can be found randomly inside candles and they're all decent. Juste is a little more flashy than the regular Belmonte. Drawing on the Bonata's blood of his ancestors, he can infuse his sub-weapons with arcane power. Throughout the game, you'll find elemental spellbooks scattered about, and depending on which one you have equipped, your sub-weapon will become entirely different and will use your mana bar instead of your hearts. This is a lot like Lament of Innocence, where you could alter the sub-weapons with magic crystals dropped by the bosses. But I think it's way cooler here because you actually have to seek out the spellbooks to be able to use them. Also, the idea of a Belmont reading spellbooks is very interesting to me, since it harkens back to Cypher herself, who also had to collect books to be able to use their magic, in Castlevania 3 anyways. It's a fire spellbook, an ice spellbook, a lightning spellbook, and a wind spellbook. There's also a secret one, which I'll mention later. Throughout the video, you'll see me swap through sub-weapons and spellbooks a lot, because it's just goddamn fun to experiment with them. Every combination feels awesome to use. Lastly, we have the more blatant RPG elements. Simon's Quest already tried to add some, and before that we saw Lament and COD, which both had them in part. Most Igavanias feature these. Juste will buy and or find armor pieces, rings and bracelets that he can equip to gain more defense or other stats. There's also the capes, which are cosmetic items. He'll level up as he fights, improving his damage, and he'll collect life and heart max-ups, which are scattered all over, pretty much the main reward for exploration, and they always feel awesome to find. Like I said, a lot like Lament and COD. I'm personally not a big fan of this RPG aspect. I think the game would be perfectly fine without it. It doesn't really add much to the experience, but it also doesn't hurt it and mostly stays out of your way as you play. That's the gist of the gameplay analysis. Harmony of Dissonance is fun. It's not very hard for the most of it, the game gives you plenty of tools to deal with its challenges, but it's still very engaging and fast-paced, and it works. And I think we can get into the map design now. Like most Igavanias, Harmony is entirely focused on the castle, but the castle has different areas and regions that are a lot more varied than what we're used to. Looking back to Lament, it's sort of like that, but the areas are more integrated and interconnected in a way that makes some sense within the universe. This is a central point in Metroidvania design, interconnectivity, right? The game's world, in this case the castle, needs to have smart, complex design that loops around itself and feels rewarding to unravel. Another central point is that the whole map needs to be accessible right from the get-go, but certain areas should be blocked off until you have a certain ability or key that lets you logically clear the obstacle in question. In Harmony's case, these items are most often relics, which you'll find throughout the castle. So does Harmony hit these points? And more importantly, does it hit them well? We'll have to see. The first area is the entrance, which is pretty much what you'd expect. We've been here multiple times already, though the aesthetics now are a bit different and the design is more cramped to facilitate vertical movement. I like how you can see the forest outside. The enemies are all pretty simple: skeletons, bats, knights. I do miss the panthers though, they normally show up here. Here's our first save room. Looks kinda strange. I mean, the save rooms are always a little quirky, right? It was a healing statue in Lament, then a chair in COD, and now a pulsing magical D20. I don't think it's supposed to be consistent, they probably just do whatever sounds cool for each game, but it's something I've noticed. So the entrance area is pretty simple, but it has 3 exits. One is blocked by a wall, and another a different type of wall that we can't break yet. We'll get to these later. The path we're meant to take now leads us to the marble corridor, and this is where we meet our antagonist. Yeah, Death's here. You might remember that he's some kind of a demon, very old, though he serves Dracula since Dracula possesses the Crimson Stone. Death recognizes Juste as a Belmont, but he lets it slip that he doesn't know why the castle showed up either. It's too early for Dracula to come back. Even so, the castle did, and as a result, so have many of Dracula's lackeys, which are tied to its existence, including Death. This guy has already died like 5 times in the canon timeline. By the way, that's more than Dracula. Anyways, there he goes. Juste complains about him running away, which, did he want to fight him at the start of the game? With what stats, Juste? Anyways, Death's on the loose, so we have to look out for that as well. And considering he's returned, there might be a chance that Dracula has too, which would be pretty cringe. Marble Corridor is an area that's a little deeper and higher up than the entrance, with arches, windows, pillars. I really like the pixel art here, reminds me of Anor Londo if you're familiar. Look at this giant skeleton in the background. There's a stupid box puzzle that lets you get the ice book, which is pretty cool. The red stone, which you can equip on the whip to make it deal fire damage. It doesn't add any visual flair, unfortunately. And the fairy journal, which lets you see the names of enemies on the screen. Epic. Back in the entrance, you can also get the soul orb, which shows the numbers of the damage you deal. Our first boss is also here in the corridor, though it's an optional fight. You can just go around it if you want, but it's a whole battalion of bats which assemble into our old friend, the giant bat, and he doesn't do much. Though it is interesting that they went with the splitting bat interpretation that was solidified with Chronicles originally. It started before that, of course. The bosses in this game are generally pretty cool, even if they're simple, though this one might be a bit too simple and kinda lame for my tastes. They drop magic crystals like in classic Vanias, and again, these serve only to fill your health bar. Another thing, this arena we fight the bat in seems to be a church altar, which makes me think this is supposed to be the place where Simon fought the Medusa, which would make sense because this is the area where the Medusa heads are introduced in Harmony. What else? There's this upper area of the corridors that doesn't look finished, and you can see a mysterious ring just out of our reach. We'll come back here later when we have the double jump. One of the exits of the corridor is this locked door, which we don't have the key for, so instead we need to find another way. The Room of Illusion is a mini area under the corridors, which looks pretty trippy, but we'll need the Sly to progress through it. And so the remaining option is the Wailing Way. This place is an open graveyard, apparently along the hills surrounding Dracula's castle. It's a pretty tough area at this point in the game, the enemies hit very hard, but it's where you get used to dodging and moving through attacks. Plenty of ghosts and lizard man and these guys, so lots to evade. This area reminds me of the graveyard area in Castlevania 3, though that one was way outside the castle grounds, not within the castle. The monster tome is here, it gives you some info on the monsters you meet, and moving forward, you enter the Shrine of the Apostates, which is a sub-area, more like a well-decorated mausoleum. We grab the energy circle here, which is kinda useless, but you can equip it on your whip to make it spin on its own, and then we meet Maxime. He seems to still be a bit stunned, though he's apparently recovered from his wounds and regained pieces of his memory. Maxime recalls being here in Dracula's castle, though not many details at all. For now, we split up again. We're both looking for Lady, and it's better to cover more ground. The guardian of the shrine is the living armor, which is a huge thing, but nothing we haven't seen. Going past the sarcophagus room, Juste grabs the lizard tail and returns to the marble corridor. I don't know what the lizard tail is supposed to be like in universe, but it lets him slide somehow, which in turn lets him grab the fire book in the corridor and then progress through the room of illusion, which in turn lets him reach a warp room. And if you hadn't gotten it before, this is how the game works, pretty much. As we find new upgrades, we'll uncover new areas that require those upgrades. And eventually, hopefully, we'll get to the bottom of the castle mystery. Warp rooms are a recurring thing in Castlevanias, but we've already seen one in Walter's castle, which connected its hub area to everywhere else, and we've seen warp chairs throughout all of Valahia in Curse of Darkness. Who built those? Anyways, the purpose of these is obviously to make traversal easier, since the maps can get pretty big, and it makes sense that Dracula could realistically have a magical transport system within his castle. In Harmony though, warping is used a bit more creatively than that. When Juste enters the portal, he's flung to the middle of nowhere. Yeah, the warp room sends you to below the entrance, in a completely different area of the castle we've never seen before. This is the castle treasury, which doesn't have a whole lot of treasure, actually. It's just some halls with statues, and are we in hell? Yeah, the ambiance goes a little crazy. Off to the right, you have a crystal cave, which might be considered treasure, I guess? And we've seen crystal caves before, but no sign of the golden seas of the treasury from Castlevania 4. I think this area looks a little uninteresting visually, but it connects to a bunch of areas in the lower castle, so we'll be revisiting either way. This is also where you can meet the merchant for the first time by making this armor guy fall down against a boulder. Apparently the merchant was swallowed by the fog and now he's just inside the castle. This reminds me of the merchants from Vampire Killer or Castlevania 2 who were hidden in the most absurd locations. This guy's kind of funny, but not really very useful. It costs a lot of money to buy his stuff, and there's nothing that you really need to beat the game, but you can find him in other places later on if you really need. To the left of the treasury, you can access the skeleton cave, and to the right, the luminous cavern. So, both caves. We're going left first, and this region appears to be a huge underground catacomb complex, analogous to what Trevor explored in Castlevania 3, but even more bizarre. Parts of this area are literally built with human bones. Damn, Dracula. There's also a bunch of cool skeleton enemies, especially like the halberd guys. And here's Maxime, by the way. He acts pretty weird in this cutscene. He accuses us of having captured Lady, then says he's got new powers to surpass ours, and then runs off. What the fuck? Regardless, our goal here is getting the double jump, which lies behind the Skull Knight. This dude was the first boss in Castlevania 3, if you recall, and in this iteration, he got an upgrade. As you strike him, he loses items and changes patterns. First he loses his sword and starts doing these dashes, then he loses the shield and fires a laser cannon from his chest, and then he's down for good. Pretty cool. The Sylph Feather is what gives us the double jump and allows us to backtrack and get a bunch of the items we missed before. By the way, the skeleton cave actually connects back to the entrance, but again, we're blocked off by a wall we can't break yet, so this is for later. Now with the Sylph Feather, we can better explore the Luminous Cavern, which is a more traditional cavernous system with some scattered ruins and castle foundations. Again, seen this all before, but here it's much more expansive. We also have plants, somehow, in a cave, and witches? There's a boss here, though I think it's optional. We've all seen the Golem before, already a classic at this point. It just makes rocks fall, really. It has a second phase where its energy core becomes exposed, so a lot like the Golem element, or rather the Golem element was a lot like this one considering the release dates. Nothing too memorable, sadly. Do note the blood cascades in the background though. Creepy. This blood cave aesthetic is probably taken from the Japanese version of Castlevania 3 and or the dungeon stage in Castlevania 4. Just behind the golem you can get this lever and... Holy shit! Did hitting that lever kill something? Is the liquid that's pouring here someone's blood? Holy shit! Anyways, you can get the yellow stone here, gives your whip lightning damage. From the luminous cavern, we shall warp again, and this time we'll be taken further up in Dracula's domain. We meet Maxime again, and he seems normal. Wasn't the case at all last time, but he doesn't seem to recall that meeting. That's really weird. Well, apparently he's recalled more of his memories. Maxime reminisces on how Juste once told him about Dracula's remains, the ones Simon collected and destroyed 50 years before. In his quest to prove himself as an equal to Juste, Maxime sought these relics out, and he didn't think he'd find them. It's still too early for the resurrection, but still he did. Dracula's body parts, reborn from the land, scattered about Transylvania, and uncovered by the swordsman as if God himself had guided him. The curse shouldn't be strong enough to give rise to Dracula not so soon, but still the castle stands, and it definitely has to do with the body parts and whatever the hell Maxime did with them once he found them. But he doesn't remember. Whatever he's done, he doesn't recall. His memory's still fuzzy. All he knows is the corpse parts are gone, and so is Lady. So, for now, we can just continue our quest. Skywalkway is the transition area that connects the castle center to the castle top and to the castle clock tower. There have been similar walkway stages in other games, though they're normally falling apart and in open skies. This walkway is very prettily decorated in comparison, with arches and statues and archers and these fucking plants from Castlevania 3 and ruler swords. It's a tough foe at this point in the game. Going up, you can enter the Chapel of Dissonance sub-area, which, despite the cool name and visuals, isn't that interesting. Is that Dracula's eye? Yeah, Dracula's eye is just fucking floating there, but we can't reach it even with the double jump, so don't think about it yet. The door out of here would lead to Dracula's throne room, but it's sealed by magic, so the only way now is back to the walkway and through the devil. We've already fought demonic creatures before in the series. There was a demon in Castlevania 3 and a devil in Castlevania 2, though that one was a common enemy, not a boss. There are also multiple demon-type enemies in Lament and COD. I don't think I need to introduce them in concept, they're just infernal creatures. It does make me wonder if there's a difference between a devil and a demon in Castlevania. I know there isn't like D&D and other tabletop RPGs, devils and demons are like different species there, but I don't know about here. I've always thought this devil fellow looked goofy, by the way. He keeps his arms crossed as he flies. But he can be tricky. His main attacks are breathing fire and clawing at you, but touching him can give you curse, which is pretty fucking annoying because curse slows you down and blocks you from dashing. It's not a super hard boss, but you need to pay attention to his movement or you'll just keep jumping right into him like my stupid ass getting cursed. I like this boss, it's cool. Onwards would be the clock tower, but instead of going there, I opted to backtrack. Now that Juste has the night goggles, he can better explore this dark path under the sky walkway. It's filled with spikes and still tricky to navigate, but the goggles help a lot. Reaching the bottom, you access the Aqueduct of Dragons, which might be underground in this version of the castle. It's often not. In fact, I think this is my least favorite area. The fishman enemies are a bit annoying, but it does look good, and the music's alright. It would be an optional area, I believe, if not for a thing that we'll discuss later. A giant merman is the boss, which is new. He summons smaller fishmen and spins. Look at the mermaid in the background. Now the aqueduct also connects to the clock tower, but from below. There's only a few areas left. We should be getting to the bottom of this. Juste traverses a labyrinth of machinery, spinning aimlessly, striking harpies, medusa heads, and more demons. You can get the green stone here. He discovers a fucking room with giant slime vats. Why is this in the clock tower? Where the Max Slimer resides. What? And he climbs to the top of this clockwork inferno to meet the classic clock tower boss fight, our friend Death. Though he's not here for a boss fight. Apparently Death himself has only now understood what created the castle. It was Maxime. Upon finding Dracula's remains, he was possessed by them, which explains why he was acting strange earlier when we met him. Dracula's power is apparently manifesting through Maxime, like what happened with Isaac and Soleo, and that's just enough for the castle to reform. All of that lines up, no big surprise there, I think. It makes sense that Maxime would be possessed after trying to mess with those remains. But the real kicker is that there isn't just one castle, there's two. This is the big twist of Harmony of Dissonance. When we warped before in the Room of Illusion, we didn't just go to a different area of the Demon Castle. We went to a different version of the Demon Castle. That's why the background in the castle treasury was so weird. This isn't the natural manifestation of the castle, it's a split version, distorted through its connection to the Infinite Corridor. Likewise, when we warped from Luminous Cavern, we were warping back to the original castle, which is the one we're in right now. The warp rooms make you warp both in location and in dimension. And the reason this happened is because Maxime's personality is split. The real Maxime, the one we entered the castle with and last met in the Sky Walkway, is the Lord of Castle A, though he doesn't know it yet. And the possessed Maxime, corrupted by the curse of the Count, is the Lord of Castle B. That's the one who threatened us in Skeleton Cave. These castles have the same general structure, but they exist on separate planes of existence. Due to the shattered consciousness of Maxime Kishine, the manifestation of the curse remains shattered as well. Now, this is interesting in a number of ways. First, it's really interesting gameplay-wise. Starting from now, the game has two different maps, Castle A and Castle B, and we'll be exploring those two maps and taking note of the differences between them. But before we get to that, we need to think of the lore implications. We've already known since Curse of Darkness that the Demon Castle is intimately linked with, well, the Curse of Darkness. Like I said, when Dracula reappeared through Isaac's body, so did the castle which had crumbled before. It rose out of the water to meet Hector. It's unclear how this happened, but it seems when Dracula sought the evil god, he eternalized not just his soul, but the entirety of his fortress. Castle Dracula was linked to the Infinite Corridor, a plane beyond reality from which its hallways spawn every time the curse returns. Which is why we've been seeing the same pattern over and over. Dracula dies, the castle crumbles, Dracula returns, the castle returns. His soul and the castle, they're almost one and the same, eternalized by chaos. The same is true for his demon army, of course, and all of the other bosses we fought over and over. But now we're seeing that the castle might precede Dracula. With Maxime acting as a conduit for the curse, it's already started emerging into physical reality, still split and malformed because of Maxime's condition, but growing stronger by the second. I said a few videos back that the Demon Castle is a living thing. It kind of is, yeah, almost a sentient being. It's normally controlled by Vlad Tepes, the lord of the castle, but it exists regardless of him. Now, we're seeing Juste's childhood friend becoming the castle master by unknowingly employing the incomplete power of the Count's corpse. And the full implications of that are yet to be seen. So, big plot twist, right? The main antagonist of Harmony of Dissonance isn't death for Dracula, it's Dracula's castle. In other words, it's Castlevania. Because the Demon Castle here, in 1748, manifests even though Dracula himself isn't ready to do it yet. It's using Maxime's soul to achieve this. And it might not be intentional, but this fragmented way the castle shows up in reminds me of Belmont's Revenge. In that game, there's 4 castles at first, and they're really weird, made of strange materials. Then the true Castle Dracula emerges at the end of the game, when all energies coalesce, possibly with the help of Soleo Belmont. I theorized in the Christopher video that the first 4 castles might have been incomplete forms of the original, and then the original only manages to come in later, because Dracula was maybe too weak at that point, and what's happening here in Harmony totally fits with that. A weakened curse manifests through Maxime, and a distorted castle is born, split in 2 realms, barely holding on, and looking really, really strange. Now, we have to remember that the idea of the Infinite Corridor only came about in 2005, after Harmony and Belmont's Revenge were out. So I don't know what the writers were thinking before that, I don't know if they planned anything ahead of time, but it's cool. It's cool how weird the castle is, and how it transcends the material realm, and what that implies for the storyline. Because it implies a bunch of things for the storyline, which we'll get into the future, and it's kinda neat. I know I yapped for a long time, but we still have much to do. Death escapes Juste, yet again, thank God, believes this new type of portal for us to cross. And when we do so, we enter Castle B. Though this time we stay in the clock tower rather than moving. Gameplay-wise, the True Castle deal is not as amazing as it sounds. Very little changes between the castles, graphics are a bit different, there's new enemies and new bosses, but the level design is mostly the same, and the music's the same too. I'll point out some differences as we go, but it's nothing major. In the case of the clock tower, for example, the sky becomes blood-tinged, as if we're in hell, and the harpy enemies are replaced by flying ice. We can access this little challenge room where you need to move faster than a metal ball to get some items, including the lightning spellbook if you warp back to Castle A after opening it. And the room where we fought the Max Slimer with all those vials is now just a room full of clocks. But when we try and move back towards the Sky Walkway, so the Peeping Eyes are enemies that have shown up before. They technically made their debut all the way back in Castlevania 3, where they would float around the screen and drop blood on you. Or I guess we could count Simon's Quest as the debut, or Haunted Castle. Anyways, starting from Chronicles, they become these eyeballs with tails which don't drop blood on you at least, but they're much more annoying to deal with thanks to how they move. And this here is a boss version of that, the Peeping Big. This guy appears to be made up of smaller eyeballs, so it's a lot like the Max Slimer actually. The Max Slimer was just a big version of the slime enemy, which also appeared in multiple games before, so the Peeping Big really is like an equivalent to it, and that makes sense, they're in the same area, just different castles. They're also both very easy and kinda boring, so there's that. The rest of Clock Tower B seems to be in utter disrepair. It's decorated by cobwebs, bent spikes, broken gears, and why is orange juice coming out of those towers rather than water? So Castle B is generally more surreal and weathered, as you can see. The same is true for Aqueduct B, which has a different palette, looks more broken down, has green water and these zombies. And liquid skeletons! There's no boss in Aqueduct B, but around this time I backtracked to find this sort of mechanism at the bottom of the clock tower, which we can break. Returning to the start of Clock Tower B will grant you the Crushing Stone. This one is interesting, it lets you charge your whip for a stronger attack, which I didn't find very useful in combat, but it can break those suspicious walls we've seen before. I'll use it in a bit. For now, I'm going to Skywalkway B, which has these mirror skeletons at the bottom, which I really like, very creative, and a green sky in the upper part. In the temple arena where we fought the devil, we instead find the Legion. This boss is optional, you can just go around it through the aqueduct, which I did, but I'm doing every boss. So the Legion isn't new either, we met it in Curse of Darkness where it was a crazy secret boss. In that game its lore is not really explained. The inspiration for the Legion is vaguely biblical, it references a biblical passage that I mentioned in the Curse video, but we're not sure what it actually is, other than that it's made of human corpses. In the Curse video, I theorized the Legion was probably an obscure ritual, possibly related to Dracula, possibly not, which resulted in the birth of the imperfect nucleus through human sacrifice. So it could be a similar thing here, but this version of the Legion looks distinctly angelical with the wings it has. And instead of using zombies to attack us, it produces smaller versions of itself. And as we shed its outer layers of human flesh, its core is a floating piece of meat protected by an energy bubble and laser tentacles. Alright, I guess this could be an even less complete version of the Legion, which didn't achieve a humanoid form yet. After all, the meat part of it does look like the Heart of Nucleus and Curse. But I don't know. Legion is a very inconsistent creature in this series. Every game does it kinda different. Maybe we can attribute it to some obscure experiment of Dracula that he keeps repeating, or maybe the Legion is its own thing, like a conscious being as the other monsters of the castle that repeatedly manifests in different forms. Who knows? This game has no actual lore, I'm making it up. Although, doesn't Dracula's second form in TV3 kinda look like the Legion? So back to the walkway. This wall here can be broken with the crushed stone, and beyond it is where we met Maxime a while ago, but that was in Castle A. Now, in Castle B, we meet a different Maxime entirely. Yeah, this is evil Maxime, alternate reality Maxime, curse-possessed Maxime. I'm not sure if he exists in both castles at once or only one at a time, but the one in Castle B is the evil one, right? And he's after Lady, I guess, but he doesn't remember where she is because the real Maxime forgot where she is as well, so that's good. And now we fight him. He turns into this shadow monster, I'm not sure why. Because we fight him later on and he doesn't use any shadow powers, maybe he's too weak currently. Or actually, is this shadow even him? Is it another creature? I don't know, I'm a bit confused. Either way, the shadow, which may or may not be Maxime, reminds me a bit of the ghosts from Castlevania Legends. It can assume 3 different forms: a panther, a giant scimitar which curses you, and a giant moth that poisons. It's really unique, but also kind of an easy boss. I don't know how you're supposed to figure this out, but if you return here in Castle A after the fight, you'll find the real Maxime here. This is a bit of an annoying part of the game. You often have to walk all the way back to a warp room so you can change castles, so you can be in the castle you need to be. And there's no easy way to fast travel across the castle. Or I mean, there is. There's those few warp rooms that send you to different places, we've already used them, but they're only connected in pairs, right? They don't exist in both castles, and they make you change castles when you warp. So the ones you most often look for is the other type of warp room, let's call it the castle warp, which is the one that doesn't teleport. And then you have to walk to one of them, and they can be far apart. It's not a huge deal because the map isn't that big and Juste is fast, but it's iffy, especially when you only have one castle warp, which is our case. There's only one in the clock tower currently. It's kind of annoying, but we'll find more later. Anyways, Maxime in walkway A. He looks pretty weak, apparently because he was almost taken over by his alter ego. We might have saved him by beating him in Castle B. He's remembering things now, and he knows his evil self wants Lady. He tells us he's hidden her in Dracula's throne room, sealed the entrance with magic, and wiped the memory from his mind. But he trusts us with the key, his bracelet. When you start the game, Juste is equipped with a bracelet called JB Bracelet, as in Juste Belmont's bracelet. It's a small thing given to him by Lady, and now we see that Maxime has one as well, also given to him by Lady. So it's a pair, like a pair of friendship bracelets, given to them by a third friend who doesn't have one herself, as far as I'm aware. Or I guess Lady might have one, but we don't hear of it. Well, it is naturally fitting that Juste needs to use Maxime's bracelet given to him by Lady to unlock the path towards her. Now he can take her the hell out of the castle before evil Maxime puts his hands on her. The sealed door is just above in the Chapel of Dissonance, and it opens. The moon hangs above the final stairway, and you can even see the clock tower in the background, which is where the warp room is. Given the context, you might even be expecting to see Dracula or something now, but no, the throne room is empty. Though a demon does barge in to greet us. Yeah, Pazuzu might have been summoned by some evil energy in Dracula's room, I don't know. But he's here in reference to the demon from Castlevania 3, acts a lot like him. And also kind of looks like Dracula's third form in CV3, which is based on the Mesopotamian god Pazuzu, which is where the name comes from. I mentioned before during the devil fight that the difference between demon and devil isn't clear in this series, and in this fight, Pazuzu, supposedly a demon, summons tiny devils, so I really don't know. Regardless, this is one of my favorite fights, I think. Can be pretty tough to dodge the fireballs, and I think Pazuzu looks really good. Like, that is a sexy sprite, god damn. Leedy's in the next room. She doesn't remember much of the traumatic experience of getting kidnapped by Maxine, apparently because her face was covered, which is good, because she's getting kidnapped again. Death wants to have his maiden for himself, and he fucking takes her. And we don't even know why at this point, right? From our POV, Death just wants a maiden for himself, legit. But it will be explained later, so let's get going, I guess. We need to kill Death now, and find Leedy again, wherever she is. Castle B version of the throne room isn't much different, it just has a pink sky and a big skeleton instead of a boss. So you stay in Castle A and head down. This area is the castle top floor, which is the series of towers and walls that crowns this stronghold. You can actually access a part of this area earlier on in the game from Castle Treasury B, and you can even fight a Minotaur here to get the Wind spellbook. I forgot to do that this playthrough though and ended up postponing it. In the Castle A version, there's a stronger Minotaur here with a ball and chain rather than an axe. They're both simple to beat. There's a steel tip behind the second guy which you can equip on the whip to make it deal a lot more damage. Going down with these lifts then, we enter Castle Treasury A, which is still very empty but more realistic without the hellish background. The Crystal Cave's still here? What? And the progression here is similar to what happened earlier in Castle B. First Skeleton Cave, then Luminous Cavern. Skeleton Cave now has a bluish hue rather than the blood red from before, and slightly harder enemies, but it's not too much. There's this room here. In Castle B, you could find a statue that looked a lot like Carmilla from Castlevania 2, but in Castle A, it's the evil deity instead, the one Dracula made a pact with. Scary. There's a whole section with these awful puzzle boxes, which we've done before, but they're especially boring and annoying here. And this room with these weird fucking lab skeletons. And then the red skeletons in this game are like goo skeletons instead of normal red skeletons. It's all very strange. Even the boss, if you recall, in Castle B it was the Skull Knight guarding the double jump. Now it's fucking Legion, but like an alternate version of Legion, which seems undead. So the Skeleton Cave may be some crazy undead laboratory in Castle A. By the way, do recall that the first Legion we found was called the Saint, so this is some corrupted version of it, presumably. It's apparently made up of dried up skeletons, it drops withered chunks of meat to run after you, and when you hit it, it opens its maw for a corpse to pop out, and that's the thing you actually have to hit. I wonder if that's the failed product of the Legion ritual, like maybe this guy's like nucleized but dead? This boss is optional, but it does give you a Cypher's Charm, which is actually a mistranslation, it should be Cypher's Charm. Reduces mana consumption, so very good. After one last box puzzle, Juste grabs the floodgate key, which is what we were actually here for. Now in Luminous Cavern A, this is actually one of the hardest areas in the game. The witches in this version are way stronger. Visual-wise, this area looks almost the same, but it's filled with water instead of blood, and there's even an entire sunken area we need to empty out, because Juste takes damage underwater for some reason. So in place of the golem from Castle B, we meet another animated armor, which is a boss we've already fought before, so everything Oh, there's this motherfucker again. You might recall this is the guy that pursued us at the start of the game, the big armor dude, but from what we'd seen, he'd fallen down the castle moat and exploded. And now he's here. How did he get here? The Luminous Cavern isn't closed at all to the entrance. What the hell? Also, who is this guy in the first place? So its name is Talos, who is like a Greek mythological character, a giant bronze robot built by Hephaestus and used by the Minoans to protect the island of Crete. That's cool. It doesn't look much Greek though, just like a generic Castlevania suit of armor. Also, the fight totally sucks. The guy just walks back and forth and you hit the leg that it broke in the fall. Okay, I said the bosses were kinda cool a while ago, but a lot of them are just... why'd you even bother? So, get past Talos and find this weird fountain room, and if you got the key from Skeleton Cave, Juste crouches down, activates the floodgate, and somehow this single drain empties the entirety of the sunken area of Luminous Cavern. So now we can walk through there. And after a bunch of annoying skeleton enemies, we meet our secondary antagonist for a definite fight. Actually, pause again. How the fuck did Death get here if this whole place was underwater? Scratch that, what the fuck was he doing inside this cave, just standing around with a scuba mask? Like, I know boss placement in Castlevania rarely makes any sense. If it did make sense, Dracula would just send all the bosses at once against us. But seriously, Death in this game is just unhinged. I have no idea what this motherfucker's doing. He just shows up in random places, kidnaps a maiden, and then goes scuba diving. Alright, time to get serious now, the evil plan time. So the reason Death has kidnapped Lady is because he intends to use her blood to strengthen the evil spirit inside Maxime. With that, it should be strong enough to overtake the real Maxime. When that happens, the castles will merge into one, and well, presumably, we might see the Count again. We obviously can't let that happen, now can we? Death is a pretty cool fight. He has the usual spawning scythes attack, but he can also use the big one, and he has lasers. It's not super challenging because Juste moves so fast and he can dodge everything, but the hits do a lot of damage. I had to use a potion here because there's a second phase, which is pretty uncommon for Death, a skeleton centipede. It's not very interesting, honestly, but at least it's new. Definitely beats the giant skull from Castlevania 3. I remember it took me a while to figure out I could stand on top of the centipede, but after I did, it was pretty easy to hit its head from behind. By the way, the idea of Dracula's power being increased through the blood of a maiden is an interesting concept. I'll talk about it in the next video though, since we don't have much time. Lady's still gone, evil still lurks, and the castles will merge. After getting the Griffin's Wing, and therefore the high jump, we will enter the final stage of Harmony of Dissonance. We need to stop Maxime. By now we've already explored most of the two castles. The map lights up in bright blue when you've explored both. So, the high jump allows us to clear a bunch of tall obstacles, for example, this shortcut that connects the caverns to the aqueducts, or this other shortcut that connects the skeleton cave to the entrance. We could also break the walls here now, by the way. And it lets you get to the skull key in Luminous Cavern A, which will open the two skull doors we saw before. They connect to the castle treasury. Not super necessary, but useful. Finally, the high jump will also allow us to grab some final items on our journey. The final boss is located right in the middle of the castle treasury specifically, but the path there is locked behind a metal door in both castles. There's two ways of opening this, one for each castle, so let's go through them. To open the door in Castle A, you need to find the switch. Where is the switch? Well, you start by heading to Wailing Way B, which is a lot more dark and dangerous now, especially with the Simon Wraiths, which are emulating Simon Belmont. Seriously, they do a fuckload of damage. The goddamn owls, too. You can get the Crush Boots here, which we'll use in a bit, and in the room where we fought the animated armor is a Cyclops instead. Another nod to Castlevania 3, I guess. This one especially does not petrify, unlike the 3D interpretations. He just has a really big hammer. It's still like in Castlevania 3, but a lot cooler. I like this boss too, tons of damage, and a cool sprite. Optional fight though. Lastly, going to Marble Corridor B and then to Entrance B, we'll find the Lure Key, which opens those rainbow doors we've also seen. There's 3 of them total, and they all lead to extra castle warps. Not mandatory either, but useful. Oh, and there's also the Platinum Tip in Entrance A, which we missed before. There's no boss in Corridor B, by the way. The room where we fought the giant bat just has an armor dude instead. But the Crush Boots we got in Wailing Way are the final piece of the puzzle. If you backtrack to Castle Top just before the fight with Pazuzu, there's an area there in the sky that's just out of reach. You can get enough height with the high jump, but these shiny blocks stop you from entering. With the Crush Boots though, there's mashed to pieces. In Castle B, there's just items here, but in Castle A, you find the switch. It's actually not a switch, I lied. It's like a hand holding some kind of organ. I don't know why this opens the door to the final boss. Like, how are they connected in any way? Well, if you break it, the passage opens, that's all you need to know. Woo. You can already go down there at this point and meet the real Maxime in the heart of Castle A. In a fit of desperation, he'll ask Juste to kill him and end his madness, and when Juste refuses, he'll fight to the death to force his hand. But that's not the ending we want. If you want to open the door in Castle B, the process is a little trickier because, spoilers, Castle B is the real ending. To open that door, Juste will need Dracula's relics, or in other words, his remains. They've already been teased all throughout this game. This whole mess started when Maxime sought out the remains and somehow actually found them. The remains are currently possessing him, and they're what's actually sustaining the castles, which is why we need them if we want to really resolve this. Now, unlike in Castlevania 2, where they're the whole purpose of the quest and each is hidden inside a separate mansion, or symphony, which I'll talk about in a later video, Dracula's pieces here are just kinda scattered in random ass places. Which I guess makes sense. They formed the castle, I guess it makes sense they would just be spread all over it. But it's weird, because you can just randomly come across some of the relics as you play, like I've already shown. The relics in this game are 6 rather than the 5 from Castlevania 2. I guess Simon had it easy compared to Maxime. The Ring of Lod is in Marble Corridor A. We saw it before. Can get it with a double jump. The Eye of Lod is in Chapel of Dissonance A. Also saw it before. You can get it with the high jump. The Heart is in Sky Walkway B, behind this breakable wall inside the save room. The Nail is in Aqueduct A, behind an illusory wall. There's actually a hint card that clues you in on it. The Rib is in Entrance B and can be reached with the Crush Boots. And finally, the newcomer Fang of Lod is in Clock Tower A. It's in a hidden room in the ball minigame. The addition of the Fang seems to be tied to Symphony. That game mistranslated the Nail as Stuff in the English version, so I guess in Harmony they just decided to include both. Though there is sprite evidence that there were plans to include the Fangs of Dracula all the way back in Castlevania 2, so that's neat. I kinda like that they're easy to find, I guess. You often come across them by accident during your playthrough, but I don't know, it feels kinda not very special to look for them. Symphony does it better, I feel. I really do like, though, that they grant you some bonuses. This was already a thing in Simon's Quest, for example. The Eye lets you see illusions when equipped, or the Rib acted like a shield. But here, all the relics act as, well, relics, so they're always active and they give you passive buffs. Either stat boosts or immunities to certain conditions like Curse or Petrify, which is awesome. It makes it a bit more rewarding to find them. Though the main reward for the relics is, of course, that collecting them opens the metal door in Castle B. An elevator takes us deep into the castle's heart, a surreal, cavernous chamber, in the center of which lies a twisted mass of guts and veins. This is probably the craziest boss arena we've had so far. Inside, Maxime awaits, and so does Lydie, and though in Castle A this room looked like some sort of energy core for the castle with a floating crystal, similar to the saving room and built in the very same blocks that the Infinite Corridor uses, in Castle B it's a flesh abomination, as if the castle itself tries to give carnal shape to the curse. This is evil Maxime we're facing logically, and he's already drank blood from Lydie like a vampire. Now fully empowered by the sacrifice of his childhood friend, he can fight Juste with his own power. But this also means Juste doesn't need to hold back. Regardless of consequence, Maxime will be stopped. In the distorted realm of the castle's soul, we have the hardest boss fight in the game. Maxime's moveset is insane. His sword attacks are really fast and hard to strike around. He's got crazy shadow clone powers, it's really fun. But you can't just cheese it with Wind Fist, it's a surprisingly strong combination. If you kill Maxime here, the castle dies with him, but that's not the best ending either. If you have both Juste's bracelet and Maxime's bracelet equipped, when you beat him, that's how you get the best ending. Because in that case, before Maxime dies, the real one is able to take back controls when he recognizes those bracelets, and in that one moment of pushback, the castle spirit makes a desperate last play. Through Dracula's remains, the spirit manifests outside of Maxime as a wraith, closely resembling the Count. To my understanding, this is a mix of the castle's soul and Dracula's own soul, which are of course interlinked. So the Dracula Wraith is the castle trying to reshape into its true master, and now wants to do this by killing Juste and taking his blood. It's an awesome idea for a final boss, and I kinda wish they hadn't put Dracula in the game at all in any way, shape, or form, but it's cool that they found a slightly more interesting way of including him rather than just straight up actual Dracula. The pattern here is very simple, especially if you use the whip flailing to block the fireballs, but even after the vampire killer dispels this vile specter, it morphs, assuming a physical form. This might just be the weirdest final form of Dracula, if you can call this Dracula, a mishmash of the scattered body parts we collected through the game, pulsing, bumbling, begging to exist, but lacking the power to. I think it's really fitting that the final phase is the easiest. The only attack it has are a laser and a very telegraphed claw strike. This isn't the Lord of Empires, just a suggestion of him given life by the Demon Castle, and at least this time, the Demon Castle loses. Once again, Dracula fades from the world before he could even actually show up for real. The castle's gone, or both of them are, and Maxime and Lydie are saved. This is the best possible ending. If you beat Maxime in Castle A, he actually dies, but Juste still manages to get Lydie out before the castle's gone. If you beat Maxime in Castle B without the bracelets equipped, he also dies, since you don't fight the Wraith, and then both Maxime and Lydie are gone. So that's actually the worst ending, even though it takes more effort to get than the bad ending, it makes no sense. Honestly, the endings in this game are just very poorly explained. Like, the game doesn't do a good job at implying what you need to do for each ending, or where you even need to go to get the endings. It's a bit annoying. Technically speaking, I guess all 3 endings could be canon, since they all result in the castle disappearing and Juste surviving at the end of the day, but the most likely is probably the good one. The 3 friends reunited, the danger erased, the evil spirit possessing Maxime banished back into oblivion along the remains of that wicked corpse. Lydie doesn't even remember anything when she wakes up, other than a vague memory of Maxime biting her, which... good for her, I guess. It's not clear what happens afterwards for these 3. In the grand scheme of things, Juste's adventure wasn't that big a deal. He didn't have to deal with Dracula's actual resurrection, he was just fixing an issue that his own friend had created. So it makes sense that he is not one of those super commemorated Belmonts of history, but that's not to say this chapter of the story wasn't important, because it opens a bunch of new questions, the biggest of which I think would be, if the curse is tied to the castle, how do you destroy it for good? But that's not for these 3 to resolve, of course. It's implied that Lydie is Juste's future wife, by the way, and the Netflix adaptation takes that cue. Cute ending, I guess. Unless you're the third wheel. In conclusion, what do I think of Harmony of Dissonance? Well, I've always thought myself more of a classic Vania guy, honestly. You might remember that I wasn't a big fan of the 3D games, and I remember, way back in the day when I first played Symphony, I didn't vibe with it either. But now that I've gotten to this point in the series, and I'm playing a lot of the Igavanias for the first or second time, I like it. I think it's a very different experience gameplay-wise. Igavanias are very, very different. They're not as challenging, they're more about exploration and optimizing your exploration, but Harmony was kind of like Simon's Quest for me. The first playthrough wasn't that good, but I really liked the second because I actually knew what to expect and where to go, and I got in a good flow. Yeah, very different, much easier games in general, which I generally complain about. I like hard games, but it's fine. I mean, a few of the bosses are still hard. Another thing I should talk about is how there's a huge artistic shift when we entered the Igavanias, which is absolutely the case for Harmony already, but I'll save that for the Symphony video or the Rondo video. I'm still thinking about it. I'll also talk more about my impressions on Igavanias in general in future videos, because this one's long enough as it is. So, TLDR, I like Harmony quite a bit, especially after replaying it, and it surprised me that I did. Harmony actually has a bad rep in the Castlevania community, mostly for having a bad soundtrack and confusing level design, and I get those complaints. The sound font they use for this game fucking sucks, and you know, it's a GBA game, but they could do better. Still, don't mind it that much. I think a lot of the melodies are still good, even if the instruments could do more. The level design complaint also makes sense. This game gives you very little direction, and navigating the duo castle system can be supremely annoying when you're trying to find shit. One recurring issue I had, especially on my first playthrough, was that I didn't know where things were on the map, because the map gives you no indication of anything. It doesn't indicate regions, it doesn't indicate special kinds of doors, it doesn't indicate obstacles. So very often I would collect a new item, like a key or an upgrade, and would think, huh, now I can finally revisit that area from before and cross that stupid obstacle. And then I would realize I had no fucking clue where that area was because I visited it 2 hours ago. There's also like an overabundance of doors. There's 3 different types, each with 1 key, so even when I could remember there was a locked door somewhere, I wasn't sure which type of door it was, so I had to go and check. Couple this with the lack of warping and... oh, wait. There is warping! Plot twist, if you grab this hint card, it tells you can press down instead of up on castle warps to warp between them instead of warping between castles, so there actually is a fast travel mechanic in the game, it's just not explained, and I only found out after I finished recording, because even if you press down to test it out, it doesn't work unless you have the hint card, which makes no fucking sense. Yes, it's a very, very rough game. In many ways, it's a lesser Symphony of the Night on a lesser console, and that shows in its technical and creative limitations. Not that Symphony doesn't have its own issues, I have gripes with it, but you know, it was on the PS1, like a real console rather than this piece of shit. But overall, positive experience. There's a few alternate modes after you beat the game. Hard mode makes you take double damage, no magic mode makes it so you can't use any spellbooks, there's boss rush mode, which is self-explanatory, and this one actually existed in Lament and Curse as well, I just forgot to comment on them. It's cool. The bosses in the 3D games are very fun, so I like their inclusion. In Harmony it's kinda some bosses are, well. You can also play as 8-bit Simon in this for some reason. And then there's Maxime mode. Yeah, most of the post-Symphony games have these alternate modes with one of the boss characters. Elementa was Joaquin, and Curse was Trevor, and here it's Maxime. Usual rules, no story, no cutscenes, no level ups, most items are gone, you have fewer health and heart upgrades, but you get the whole castle unlocked right from the get-go, and you can go pretty much anywhere you want. Maxime is really fun to control, he's got a triple jump rather than a double jump, and he can do this somersault magic attack that's really good for crossing rooms. His Stellar Sword is a super fast attacking weapon, and when you use its sub-weapon function, it unfolds into a ninja star. Yeah, apparently the Stellar Sword is like 5 separate blades stacked on top of each other to make a single blade, and when it unfolds, it becomes a ninja star. That's really cool. Also, I just noticed that Maxime doesn't wear a shirt, huh? Maxime also has spells you can do with Street Fighter-esque button combinations. There's this one that makes a clone, and this one that heals you. They consume hearts though. Like Joaquin mode, Maxime mode isn't super interesting. It does get kinda boring to plow through every boss in the game, but it's short, so not a big deal. Your goal is killing every boss, then going to the Metal Door in Castle B and fighting the final boss, which is just the final phase here. Wait. Before I forget, there's the extra spellbook you can get as Juste. It's pretty well hidden inside a save room, and it's called the Summoning Tome. Depending on which sub-weapon you have equipped, it summons a different familiar to help you. It's pretty cool and strong, but like, the game never really gets that difficult, and it makes this kind of feel like overkill for everything in the game. The existence of the Summoning Tome reminds me of Maria Renard also, but put a pin on that for now. Last but not least, the furniture room. You might remember the chair room from Curse of Darkness. In that game you could find random chairs throughout the map, and they showed up in the chair room like a collection. This is where the idea actually originated from. The furniture room is an empty room in the castle treasury, which Juste can slowly fill as you collect furniture items through the 2 maps. It's a cool addition, I guess, especially because movement is a lot more palatable in Harmony, so it's not as tedious to look for these. You even get a little bonus from it. That scene I showed with Lady laying her head on Juste's shoulder, you only get that if you have all the furniture. In the normal ending, she doesn't do that. So, moral of the story, women love guys with a passion for interior decoration. By the way, what does Harmony of Dissonance mean? A lot of Castlevanias after 1997 have these really nonsensical subtitles, like fucking Lament of Innocence. I get there's a musical theme going on with Lament, Harmony, Aria, Symphony. I don't know how that relates to Castlevania, but it's there, it's a thing that exists. But then some games don't follow that, like Curse of Darkness isn't a music thing, it just refers to the Curse of Darkness. So like, are the subtitles supposed to mean anything when they're like this? Lament of Innocence, I guess, can be interpreted as referring to Leon's innocence or Sarah's, I don't fucking know. But Harmony of Dissonance? Maybe the castles are the dissonance, but then what's the harmony? The Japanese title is Concerto of the Midnight Sun, which makes even less sense. Subscribe and like and all that shit, and donate if you want, I guess. The next time I'll talk about the best game in the franchise, so see you later.